container, something along the lines of this size right here, and without, it's dark. I keep it in that container all mixed up and it's dry. I have never had it mold when it's wet, but that's always my concern, that mold might build up in wet material. So I keep it dry as I can until I'm ready to go use, to go stick some plants. At that time, I will wet this stuff, and I'll make sure that it's thoroughly wetted. I'll look through it, I'll dig into it, and I'll make sure that it's thoroughly wetted, because when you're propagating using this technique, you don't want to put any water in your soil until roots have developed. You're going to do all of your wetting with your spray bottle. You're going to keep the leaves wetted. If you remember from your gardening class, we had something called transpiration. That's where the leaves are letting the fluid out. The water had to come from somewhere. It comes up from the roots. But what if you have a cutting? There's no roots on it yet. So, but the leaves, they still want to do transpiration. So you keep the leaves wet so that you have some liquid on there that can do the transpiring and keep from pulling so much water up through from the ground that the stem dies.
Question.
One nice thing about this greenhouse that I like, it has vents. And I'll show you when I use those in a few minutes. See what else we have out here.
Is that a 50-50 blend that you make?
No, it's a blend of that little 16-quart container and this big 50-pound bag or whatever it is of potting soil.
So what percentage?
I don't know, how many quarts in that? Can somebody read the label?
Well,
and
it
tell me?
says 28 liters.
28 liters.
28 liter.
It
Well,
covers
that's about a 28 quart and this is 16, so it's about
Half
I think that's
Actually,
1 to
1/3.
2. About 1 to 2.
It says
1 to 2, okay.
But I don't bother, I just take the bag,
That's by volume.
empty the bag in my big bin, dump this in and mix it up. It's usually dry, I can mix it with my hands. And seems to be a perfect ratio. There's no science behind that.
So not 50-50.
It's actually.
Before you actually,
1/3, 2/3. Yeah.
before you do any of this, you need to go out and do some pruning. And people sometimes have questions on pruning. You can prune pretty much any time of the year as long as you don't take so much off of the plant that you're going to hurt the plant. And you probably might remember from your pruning class, you do pruning, the first thing you do is go in and pull out dead wood. That branch is not going to be missed because it's already been whacked off or denied food from the mother plant. So you go ahead and cut that off. I wouldn't use anything bigger than this. If you need something bigger than this to do pruning with, you should be doing it in December and January and February when the plant is truly dormant. But I like this saw because it cuts both ways like a crosscut saw, but it's made like a handyman saw. So I have a few of these around the house. Whoever might want one, I have one. And I keep it in its little scabbard that they gave me because this thing will cut you if you look at it.
Stephen, have you ever found online something that can take the place? You said that container.
Polly's looking for it now. I've
Oh,
gone and done some looking.
Okay.
And what I'm looking for is a tall dome. Here's the container that I usually use, but I'm not doing lots and lots of propagating. And this is your 20-quart sterilite container. These lids do not have any holes in them, so as long as you keep the water volume below what this lid can hold, you can set it on top of your furniture inside and let the plants work from there. Now we have our greenhouse. It actually has a lot more headroom than this does.
Oh. Now, would you put holes in the top of that?
No, I don't. This
Okay.
is $5. These are $5, maybe $6 at Walmart.
Yeah. You can buy them at dollar store too, and sometimes they have extra lids that they're selling separately for 50 cents. So you can just buy the lids.
If you need more lids, I only need one per container.
Okay.
But this type has just about been discontinued for the ones with the positive latches that go
Yeah.
over. But the latches do not put holes into the side of this. The latches are, so you can use either one of those. This size is good when I'm really getting serious about my propagating. And I've done as many as 200 a day. I will use this flipped over
Oh,
into this.
oh,
Looks like this has actually been used for that at one point in time. What size is this? This is a 50 quart. And I want the ones with the smokiest sides that I can get. I don't want crystal clear sides. If the sun, you're not going to have this in the sun at all. But if the sun does hit this thing and you're sitting here and sunlight hits it, you want it to diffuse. But you never want to put this in the sun. I had a bunch of plants in one of these and set it on top of my grill to go do something, and the grill was in the shade. When I came back, the grill was in the sun. Every plant had been cooked. So these you'll do all of your plant propagating either in in indirect sunlight or not in the sun at all. I try to find a sunny window where the sun isn't going to be shining on this. But I actually bring these things in the house in the wintertime and do the propagating inside because it's hard to propagate when your plants are frozen.
So why do you not put holes in the top of those because of the expense of the tub?
No, because I don't want it to be ventilated all the time. Since I keep getting asked that, to ventilate this, I usually will go out during the day and lift this off, okay, and let this dry out, and then I'll come back and re-wet all my leaves and put the lid back on. If I'm outside, I might take a brick or a block and just simply do something like this, and that'll let the excess out. So this is a little bit of experimenting at your own house, and you'll see what works best for the particular plants that you have. You don't want the plants to be so wet for so long that they start to rot. That's one of the biggest concerns there is stuff rotting. And since we talk about stuff rotting, let's talk about your greenhouse and your container here. You're going to make sure that when we call putting the holes in these things dibbling, you're going to dibble a hole for your cutting. Make sure that your hole does not come within a 1/4 inch of the bottom. You don't want your plant to get within a 1/4 inch of the bottom. Water will drain out of these. I re-wetted all these yesterday. I let the water drain out. This particular little greenhouse has a little place in the side you can actually drain the water out. So it's nice. If the plant is all the way in the bottom of your medium, it will put out roots, which will then proceed to rot because they will keep water. There's something you may remember called capillary action that makes things the oil rise in your wick. Due to gravity, will cause the water to drain out of this up to about a 1/4 or 1/2 inch from the bottom, and that much will stay in there due to capillary action. Make sure that the bottom of your plant, when you're putting it in here, is above that point. You can get a little dibbling stick and mark your dibbling stick. When you put it in there, you can say, okay, put a piece of tape around this, and that way you're never going to get too deep. Too shallow is better than too deep. I like this container because it's nice. This little greenhouse came with all these containers. Before that, when I was using just the Walmart container, I use these. I like the deep ones. You can see they're about the same depth. And I will, since you're putting a plant in these that doesn't usually have much in the way of leaves or anything, a lot of times it's just a stalk, I can sometimes put 1, 2, 3, 4, but always I'll do 2. I'll find a way to get 2 in there, 2 of the same kind.
So Steve, you're saying then that when you put the seed in,
No seed.
no seed,
We're going to be propagating from cuttings.
cuttings, oh, okay, I see.
If you want to grow things from seeds, fine.
It's
but this
different,
is about
okay, this is
propagating from
cuttings, okay.
It'll help you be more successful at
Right.
doing that.
Steve?
Yes, sir.
One other question. A while ago, you said something about keeping the potting soil and everything very dry.
Yes, until
Now
I'm ready to
you're
use
talking
it.
about diddling and having water. What do you do in between? Do you water everything, let it dry?
This right
before
here,
you do the cutting?
this was-
You don't put it in dry soil?
This was dry soil yesterday.
Yeah,
Okay, so I get a bottle of water and start dumping it into here.
okay.
Then I drain this out. It takes a while to get all these wetted because dry soil does not want to wet
That's
easily.
right. That's right.
Okay, so I'll let it sit in this water and actually wick the water up to the
Okay, so
top.
the water's at the
Then I'll
bottom
keep
of the
putting
tray.
more in the bottom. I probably wetted these things until they were flooded.
Okay.
I probably did that 4 or 5 times. I will then dig around in my container and make sure that I don't have any dry soil inside. So then I know that all the soil is wetted.
Yeah, that was
Show
a
them the
concern I
plant.
had because dry soil won't.
Dry soil won't do
Yeah,
anything. Your plant
Yeah,
won't. your
you
plant
want
won't-
that soil moist. You know,
This all happens through the magic of chemistry, and
Right,
you're not going to have any chemical reactions in dry soil.
right.
Show them the plug on that,
Excuse me?
the plug that's on the side, is that a plug?
Yeah, there's a little plug here on the
That-
side of this particular container
Yeah.
that lets you drain the water out.
Oh, that's cool.
And if it gets too deep, it'll get up here to where this plug is held into the side, and it'll drip out anyway.
That's good for the the junior master gardeners in particular, so they don't overwater.
I think that's where he got it.
I know,
Yeah.
it's too bad can't find it anymore.
My typical tools of choice when I'm taking cuttings are, they're right here, a bypass pruner. When you're taking cuttings, you want to use a bypass pruner, not this branch crusher.
And
This branch crusher has an anvil right here that this comes down and pushes against to cut the plant. And where you cut it, you're heavily bruising that stem. This bypass cutter works just like a pair of scissors, and it will cut it off cleanly without doing the damage. So I have lots of everything. This has an advantage in that it has lots of mechanical. I can cut a plant as big as I can get into this thing. I can get a pretty good sized plant, and I can cut it no matter how weak I am. I gave a little old lady this one day, and I said, I want you to cut a plant. And she cut this one. She cut it with this. She could hardly make a dent with this. It was too heavy a stem. The reason was, there's this, it's hard to see unless you're really close, but there's all these little notches in here. And when you're trying to, you push a while and you can't get any more, and then as you let up, this thing will go into a second notch, increasing your mechanical advantage, and let you go further, and eventually it'll go into this last notch to cut it all the way through.
That's like her bottle opener.
Let's see if it can see that in here. What's that?
It's like a bottle opener.
Yeah, it could be that way. Let's see
You
this.
know the one, right?
Sorry.
I got this one off the internet, and it turned out it did not work very well.
That'll be after.
And you can see there's these little notches in here maybe, and this does the same thing. And it's really big, but then as you squeeze really hard, you've gotten all you can get, and you relax your grip, and this will fall, this part right here will fall into another notch, and let you cut a little more, and eventually you can cut it in two. I have limb loppers that work the same way.
Steve, do you worry about them being like clean, like sanitized or anything?
Yes, I want to get to that. Thank you. Like Ed McMahon, thank you. This right here, this is a shovel. Some of you that have been to old symposiums remember that there was a company that made shovels that they took these diggers and they took shovels and they put these really raucous looking notches on there, and when you had one of their shovels, you could put it into the ground. I think it almost could dig concrete. It was so sharp. This is great because it is sharp. Now, last night I actually cleaned. I'm not worried about rust on my plant. I'm worried about germs.
right.
Okay, and so I cleaned this, and then all of us have tons of this hand sanitizer sitting around. Somebody had taken out of my box, probably me, my what do you call the alcohol wipes. I usually keep alcohol wipes in here. And I want to sanitize my plants that I'm going to be cutting. I want to sanitize my blades, excuse me, that I'm going to be cutting. And I use the alcohol wipes for that. And when you're out cutting plants, whether you're doing it for the purpose we're talking about today or any other time, you want to make sure that you never have any diseases on your blade. Let's say that you're out here, from time to time I have a Cuba, and for some reason they'll get some kind of a black disease and I'll have a stalk that turns black. If I cut that stalk, before I make another cut anywhere on that plant, I will take my alcohol wipe and I will wipe my blade off to kill those germs. And then I'll make another cut. So you want to make sure you never cut the plant with an infected blade. You're just going to pass on the infection. So just think, you want to keep this as clean as you would keep a wound on your hand.
My neighbor uses bleach. That's not good, is it?
Bleach is not good. I've
Okay.
seen bleach mentioned several times.
Yeah.
Bleach is the enemy of steel. Most blades are made out of steel. I recommend alcohol. Keep the bleach in the
Okay.
bottle. Use it on your clothes. Don't get it anywhere near your gardening tools. And I've seen bleach mentioned in some online things. I don't know where those guys are coming from.
Okay, that's
Do
good.
you also use the hand sanitizer?
The hand sanitizer I have here because I couldn't find my alcohol wipes.
It's mostly alcohol.
But this could.
But that would work though, right?
Oh, this
Because
would
then you have a
work,
lot
yeah. So, what I would do with this is
May I ask a
is
question?
simply, I'll do it right now just so you can see.
Might need to be a little louder.
Put a little bit in here.
Steve, we
Yes,
have a
ma'am.
question.
So when you're cutting when you're clipping your stems, do you have to clean your blade after every cut?
No,
Or-
only if you have diseases that you're cutting disease. But if you're cutting the same plant
Plant.
and you're cutting nice viable stems, cut away. Don't
Okay.
worry about that. I do when I'm taking cuttings, I do sanitize my blade between different plants. Some plants are susceptible to certain diseases that another plant's not susceptible to, and you don't know what is crawling around on those plants. And so I'll sanitize my blade. This is all it takes. This thing right here. I only use this particular blade for one task. I have paper bush, Edwardia. And if you people have Edwardia, you've probably already noticed that there's some little volunteers coming up from the base of the main plant. Those volunteers have roots on them. Every one will have their own set of roots, but they are attached to the mother plant. So what I do is I go in, here's my mother plant stem, and I will put this right against the mother plant. Pretty a mature plant. It's got all the parts. It's got the roots. It's got all the mature plant. In my vernacular, it means that a plant has all the parts that it needs, that it's not a cutting. So that's a mature plant. This needs to grow a little bit bigger. So I want to make a little distinction between mature does not have anything to do with the size of the plant. It has to do with whether it has all of its parts.
Maybe a better word is complete.
Complete, that's right. I knew there was a, thank you. That was that's
Mature
what we
is
learned in Master
very
Gardening
hard.
class. It's a complete plant, thank you.
Steve, you were mentioning the Edwardia. If you take that plant off the mother plant, does that diminish the mother plant? Isn't that how they spread, sort of like blueberry bushes? They sort of put those little things up.
I'm not exactly sure because I never let one stay on attached.
Oh.
You'll see those in the
I've got
Master
lots of-
Gardener plant sale from last year.
Uh-huh.
Because they sell for good money. I paid $35 at Biltmore for the paper bush that I have. It's a
Right.
humongous paper bush. And I pull it, and I found that
I have a lot if anybody wants cutting.
the ones that are a year old
Yeah.
will actually have new stems coming up from the base
Wow.
in a pot. So I'll go, before I put them in the plant sale, I'll cut those off. And, excuse me, not cut, I'll detach those from the mother
Right,
plant
okay.
and repot those.
Right.
Next year. Next year's sale.
Can anybody tell me the difference in how you take a cutting, if you're going to take a cutting, how you would cut into the plant? Let me get a piece of the plant here. What is different about how you would cut that plant, if you're taking a cutting versus how you would, where you would cut it just for the purpose of pruning back the bush.
The diagonal.
Oh, I see, I was looking and unzipping at the same time. Let's take a look at this plant, for instance. Where would I cut this plant if I was pruning the plant? The question I'm asking has to do with the location of the plant and its nodes. That's not big enough. Let me get something a little bigger so everybody can see it. Ah. I knew what all these were when I pulled them off, I'm not sure. Okay, we have a plant here. You've got a node up here and here and here. Where would I cut this plant for the purpose of just pruning my bush versus taking a cutting? I'm talking about relative to the node, the location of the node.
Above it?
Would I cut it right under the node?
Above it.
Above it. Right above the node. That's the right answer. I have one of my heroes or heroines of plant propagation is Abby Flint. Some of you may know Abby. She is definitely the guru of propagation. Abby has something that, if you have it, let me know. Abby has a computer-controlled timer that watering system.
Box that you.
You're not talking about Rainbird, you're talking about.
The answer would be yes or no, because if you have one, you're going to know. Okay. These, if you go to a regular nursery, there's I forget the name of the man down there where Happy Cow Creamery is a nursery that we've made a few Master Gardener trips to. And I've been into his greenhouses, and he has these computer-controlled things that are wetting his plants every 3 minutes, 3 hours, whatever he wants. And then he also makes sure that all the plants are sitting in potting soil on an open mesh screen so the water can drain out of every single thing. There's no excess standing water. Most of us don't have that. So if you do, the way she's going to tell you to do things is a little bit different than I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you how to propagate plants for the rest of us that don't have greenhouses and don't have computer-controlled timers. But you cut the plant above a node, which is where I cut this one. But when you stick the plant, you're going to have cut this off. Now the reason I cut it above the node and leave this attached for right now, many stems, and you don't need to know which ones, I couldn't tell you. Many stems will start to heal over the instant you cut them. All of us know that we have this problem with our flower cuttings. If we're having a vase full of flowers, we need to take them out every now and then because the end is healed over, and make a new whack and put them back down into the water so they can pull some water up, because once this heals over, no water can come up that stem. But you can make your cut flowers last weeks longer by simply going through and cutting off the stems. So we want to, when we're trying to propagate the plant, we're going to cut this off at the last thing, as the last thing we do before we stick it in the soil. Prior to putting it in the soil, there's some things you must do. Let's see if I covered all the pruning things I wanted to cover with you. I didn't really cover lots of pruning things. You notice these are just household scissors. I don't have to use these for most things. But I want something sharp because I want you to decide, and let's look at another example over here so you can see what the difference is. Here's one. This is my variegated euonymus or some name like that. I have a variegated one. You can see the nodes are fairly close on this plant. Gosh, they're an inch apart. I like to get 2 nodes under the soil if I could possibly manage. I like to get a couple of nodes, so I could get this node, nice big node, and there's one right above it, right there. There's another, I can probably get 3. And I want to have at least 2 nodes above the soil, just to help the mother plant. As you look at a plant carefully, you will see that we have these little buds that want to become bigger plants. They won't do anything as long as I have this terminal bud on the end. The terminal bud is what is telling the plant when it can put out leaves and when it can't. So when you're doing your cuttings, one of the things you want to do is cut off the terminal bud. You now have removed the breaks. Now any of these can leave. But if you put it in the soil without removing the terminal bud, the chances of these budding out, these are live buds right now, are pretty slim, maybe none. What's that material that's in the plant that, what?
Auxin.
Auxin.
Yeah, the
Okay.
terminal bud will
The
put-
auxin,
will control.
the terminal bud controls the release of auxin.
Right.
And the auxin is what's going to allow this plant to make more roots. I mean, think about it. We're effectively scraping our thumb, sticking it in the soil, and expecting the thumb to make new roots to grow a new human. It doesn't work. How does a plant know when I put it into the soil that I want this area to grow roots instead of just heal itself over? I haven't figured that out yet, but it does know. So I will use my clean scissors. I will start a little bit above the node and come right down through the node, going through that first layer. If it were skin, we would call it the epidermis. And I'll just be pulling the bud off too.
And this is for one that's below the soil or above?
I am going a little bit above the node and below the node. Once you scrape all this off, you may have trouble seeing where the node was. Next, I'm going to cut this off right below the node, or where I think the node was. Whoops, here now. Now I'm going to use my root hone. Let's see, I have this. How many people went to the symposium? If you looked in your bag, you found this. This is fantastic stuff. I use this in the Junior Master Gardener program. I'll mix up this little container here. I'll have an adult that I will give instructions, do not set this down. We had an adult one day that set it down and immediately fell over. Now, I didn't have a spare. I always take a spare now. But this little bit here, this stuff that's in this little pouch will get squeezed into here. You'll fill this up to one of the lines will tell you on the instructions. There's enough rooting hormone here to probably dip 1,000 plants. It tells you that it will only last 24 hours. I have dumped this into a pill bottle and put it in the fridge, and I have been using it for days later. So it's something, but if you do that, please be sure you label that container with poison this. Put an adult-proof lid on it and tie it down and tighten it up real fast, real good.
Yeah, I was kind of freaked out reading the hazard. I was kind of freaked out reading the directions about the environmental hazards or toxicity or something that was.
Well, this is
very
really
scary about what that.
This is really powerful stuff. When you dip your plant into it, I tell them to count 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Take it out. Let anything on there drip back in. If you leave this in more than about 5 seconds, the acids are so great they will actually damage the stem. So you've got it's a 3-second dip and take it out. So a lot of kids can, the entire Junior Master Gardener class can dip into this one container. And usually when I'm teaching the class, I will have already thought about all the cuttings I'm going to take that day after the class is over, and I'll take this remainder back home with me and I will stick all these cuttings that I've already thought about that day, and it'll still have most of it there.
So what do you do with it? How do you get rid of it?
I dump it into a container in my, keep it in my fridge. I still have the stuff there from last summer's class.
Oh, I thought
You just keep using it.
Oh, you can. I don't know that there's a danger of this
No.
contaminating anybody's sewer system or anything. I mean, just think about it, it's only a couple ounces.
Yeah, just pour it out.
So you can just
The
pour it
liquid's
out.
safer than the powder. in
What's
fact.
that?
The liquid is actually safer than the powder. The powder is dangerous to breathe, so, in my experience.
You're probably correct. This is Rutone. And it's really good if you're only doing a few plants. And when I put this in, I want to get Rutone above where I've scraped my plant. It acts as an antiseptic also. So if you can get a little extra in there.
Is that powder?
This is Rutone powder.
Okay.
I'll shake some powder off, the extra powder off.
You use
And you can
both?
see I've got it well above where I scraped it. I scraped it to here. And then I will take what I call a dibbling stick, and I will dibble my hole. And I mentioned that we want to be, right where I have the dirt stop. In a normal day, I would put a piece of tape on here to know just when to stop dibbling. I'll dibble it. Now with Rutone, you want to make sure you don't knock the powder off when you put it in. So you got to make your hole fairly large. Put the Rutone in. Put the stem in. And I didn't force it because I had made a hole at the right depth. If you force it, you'd go right through that, right to the bottom. And that's it. And after I will keep this stem wet.
Are you using both the powder and the dipping?
No, I did not. I don't have anything in this. This is empty.
Okay.
This was just to
But you
show
don't
you.
typically use both at the same time?
No, each one is a rooting hormone. When you read the literature, you will see that it says that there's really no difference between rooting hormones.
Steve,
I don't believe that. This to me is like the best thing since sliced bread. This stuff right here. But it's really expensive. That little bottle that you got in your bag, if you tried to buy that, it would be $5 or $10.
So,
And they sell it like a half pint or a pint for a humongous amount of money. So it's really expensive stuff. So I try not to waste it on a demo where I'm been sticking up just a few plants.
So is there any place locally you can actually buy dipping oil?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I wish I had brought it. I live down the street. I still have a box of it from last year. So, from the symposium. So if anybody wanted to swing by my house on the way out, I'd be happy to give you a box of them.
It's
So-
worth a
How many
tank
do
of
you got?
gas, so
Yeah.
it's certainly
I
worth
don't know,
stuff.
I have a box. They sent late.
They usually give me some left over from the symposium, so I always have plenty to use for
I have to
demonstrations.
go back. I stuck
See,
it in my
Yes,
does this
ma'am.
work for all woody perennials?
Say that again?
shed
Does
and
this
they
rooting
rested it
method
somewhere.
or propagation method work for all woody perennials?
I have not found one it would not work
So
for.
tea olives, azaleas.
I've done tea olives. All woody perennials work quite well.
Have you tried grapes?
No, I don't have any grapes to try.
Well, I have a special muscadine. that I
Now, grapes,
propagate.
aren't they usually grafted onto a certain kind of stem to make, because the basic plant something will happen in the soil, I don't know if it rots or whatever, aren't they mainly raised by grafting? Like apple trees?
Like apples and.
I don't think so. I don't think grapes.
Probably not a muscadine.
My neighbor
I got muscadine.
grafts his. I can tell you, my neighbor grafts his because he doesn't like the way they grow on their normal.
Right, I think you use a certain kind of rooting stock and graft onto that. The rooting stock is the hardy stuff in the soil, and then the graft is whatever flavor grape you want. You can have several flavors of grape coming off the same root stock.
Yeah.
So you can do this year round.
You can do this year round. I have not found a time of year it wouldn't work. The biggest thing you have to deal with in the wintertime, here, let's set that back up here. The biggest thing you have to do with the wintertime is making sure that you have a place indoors to bring it. You do not want these to freeze.
Yes.
But you don't need excessive light, you said.
You need it to be out of direct sunlight, like in a bright window,
Right, yeah.
maybe an eastern window or a northern window, that would work fine. Or maybe you have a window where there's a shadow that comes across, and the shadow stops just at the edge of where you have this setting so that there's no direct sunlight.
So even in the summertime, you would not want to put these outside.
In the summertime, I have a beautiful magnolia at the corner of my deck. And I set
saves
this
everything,
under my
yeah.
magnolia tree on my deck.
Uh-huh.
And I go out to the deck frequently. It does take some time when you first start all this, you have to be able to babysit it. You're going to want to come out every couple of hours and spray these again.
Couple of hours?
Every couple of hours, and then it'll be that way for a few days.
And it works too.
What's
I have 3 kids and I don't check, kids have to eat first, so it also works if you don't check on it.
So I'm going to cut this one off to show you again what I'm doing. I'm going to cut it off here to make two stems I can cut. I forget what
And
this
you don't want
was.
really thick stems, do you?
Say that again?
You don't want really thick stems, you just want
Oh, this is I'll show you in a moment. Yeah,
Okay.
you can use any
like
thickness of
anything, okay,
stem.
great.
The thick stems are usually woody growth, and woody growth is harder to root, but they are much more substantial and hardy plants than ones that are grown from like a tip cutting. And these will make quicker roots, but they're really susceptible to not surviving. So you have your choice. Do you want something that's going to survive a long time? I find that if I take care of my plants, even the ones I do from the stems like this, that I'm in good shape. I just cut the tip off. When I'm going to put this thing under the soil, I got to get shorter than that. Okay, I'm going to cut this one off way back here, so it'll fit in my container. When I take the bottom leaves off, these are little techniques that I found increase your success. I will try to pull the leaf off, and maybe it'll cause a little of the outside of the plant to strip off with it. The part that goes under the soil, I want to go ahead and wound that plant, so stripping that off. But the part that's above the soil, I want to remove the excess leaves. I will cut these. I don't want to damage the stem, so I will cut these off. Can you see that we have these little itty bitty buds wanting to come out, and by cutting off the tip, I now cut off the break. So I want another reason to keep this. I want to give you something to hold on to as you're cutting this off. So I'm going to scrape away that. No real problem there. And I think I know where the node was. It was right here. The node is where all of the hormonal action is. You guys all know about hormones. So that's where all the hormonal action is. So you want to keep that node. Let's see what I do with my root. There it is.
Don't drink from that bottle.
So we have another plant right here. I can tell from the leaf what this plant is. Without a leaf on that one, I'm not sure what I have. No, I have all my plants together. I have another one here if somebody wants to practice later. I have all my plants in this cooler right here. This is especially important in the summertime. Let's say you want to go out and the gardener is coming. You can afford a gardener. So the gardener's coming and he's going to trim all your hedges or your shrubs or whatever, and you want to take a bunch of cuttings. What do you do with them? I have this cooler. I don't know how much of it I can show you right now, but it has ice in it. In the bottom of this cooler, this is a plastic liner. In the bottom of the plastic liner, you can't see it unless you're standing right here. I have taken a foam egg carton, cut it so it'll fit in here, and shoved it into the bottom. I now start taking plants that I'm cutting and I'll start filling this thing with plants. The reason for the plastic egg carton, I do not want these plants to be sitting in ice water. I want them to stay cold. You can put them in your refrigerator, so somebody's going to say, what is that new kind of lettuce, Mom? Chomp, chomp. You want them to stay cold, so you stop that hormonal action. You stop everything that's going on. So there's ice in the bottom of this, and the egg carton is to allow about that much melted ice to accumulate before I've got to go and dump it out. I have, I used this technique when I went to my son's wedding down in Baton Rouge, and I'm really glad that I did, because my new daughter-in-law's grandfather volunteered at the greenhouses at LSU. And he volunteered to take me over to the greenhouses. Oh, I'm so glad. They had more stuff laying around on the ground than you can, well, they had come in and trimmed and just thrown it out. So, so I helped clean up the mess, threw it all in here. He had some plants in the backyard that he gave me some cuttings from. Threw those in here. It was probably a week after I got home before I ever pulled any of these out. I went ahead and used the same techniques that I'm using here. Everything grew. And I've used, in the summertime, plants will dry out really fast. Let's say you want to go out and get a whole bunch of plants. I recommend that you do your cuttings in the morning. Do that in the morning. There's something about how the sap rises and all. Do your cuttings in the morning, but maybe you don't have time to stick them all right then. Maybe you don't have time that day. Maybe it's the next day you're going to do it, but someone was going to come in and whack all your bushes up, and you would miss all those nice cuttings. So put those in here. I used a Playmate cooler for a long time until somebody borrowed my Playmate cooler and didn't bring it back. But anyway, it's got a plastic bottom in it, and it's perfect for this. But keep these plants moist. Keep the leaves wetted. Close the lid. And these are good for quite a while. So that's another little technique of being able to do these on your own time rather than feeling like you have to do something right then. That's like this stuff, this rooting hormone that I put into a bottle and put in the fridge because I can't use it that day. And I have used this a long, long time after they said it was no good. So let's do this one again just to reinforce. I'm going to put this node and these two nodes under the soil. How did I determine that? Because I know how much space I have, how much height I have, and I can get these nodes under the soil. I'm going to let these stay out. So I'm going to tear this one off. Maybe it'll strip some of the side. It didn't. I'm going to cut off all but the top leaves. You still need to get a little photosynthesis in here. So I'm going to leave these top leaves on so the plant can survive. And I'm going to scrape this side. All the way down to this bottom one. This all seems like some little kid's craft, doesn't it? It's really pretty simple. The longer I do this, the simpler it is. Like I say, I told, what was it, first and second and third graders, and we give them, and when I'm going to a class at the Montessori school, the teacher would have bought some of these big boxes. I would have taken a ton of these up already with wetted soil in them, and each child had a chance to stick plants in there to mark their plants, what they were, put their name on it so they know whose it was, and they would put those into this big container and set it over in the light of a window.
So when do you take the cuttings when do you take the cuttings out of the greenhouse?
You want them after you have roots, and the way you're going to tell you have roots,
A good bit of roots?
any roots whatsoever will work.
Okay.
I don't actually take the cuttings out as much as I take all the soil with it. I want to get as much soil as I can. I don't want to damage the roots when I take the cutting out.
So you'll take the entire pot of perlite and potting soil and then put it either in the ground or a larger pot?
Well, I have enough of this mixture at the house to probably last me till early summer. So then I'll keep using that until then. It's sitting in a big container, not a clear container, it's a dark container,
Right.
a green one. And I'll just get out what I need, wet it, and stick my cuttings in it. I know how many of these I'm going to need before I get started, because I know how big a cutting supply that I have and how much time I have to mess with it. If I only have a couple of hours, I might only be able to do 8 or 10 pots.
Right. But then when you're ready to take the plant out of these pots.
I take this plant right here, I turn this upside down,
Take the whole thing out.
take the whole thing out. If I've got 2 plants in there, before I do it, I will come out and maybe take a cut right through here, literally a cut with a pair of scissors or something, and I'll take a cut through that, because I may only want this particular plant.
Right. Okay.
Usually it doesn't work out that way. I have already thought about what I was doing when I stuck these things.
Are they strong enough to put in the ground then, or are you still gonna
Yeah,
put in
you
a
can
pot?
put these in the ground, but I typically move them to a larger pot.
And let them get bigger, a little bit bigger?
Let them get a little bit bigger where they're protected. I have a squirrel issue at my house,
Don't we all? Jeez.
and I'll talk to you more about that this afternoon. Now, as these plants as roots start to form, you will see, the first thing you will see, you will either see the stem turning brown, which means it's dying, I will pluck it out and throw it away, or you will see that it's living, and these tiny little leaf buds will start growing and making leaves. And that's what I'm looking for to happen first, before anything else happens. So I want these little leaves to leaf out. How did I get this too long?
It is 11:15.
Yes, I did. I got it too long. I have to be bent over. Excuse me, another question? Oh, no, okay.
Yeah, Steve, it's 11:17. I wasn't sure when you wanted to take a
Let me
break.
see what else I want to show you on this technique before I get into another one.
Steve, one thing I might suggest, you said use potting soil like we did, the old Jolly Roger.
Yeah.
The potting soil we got at the symposium this year is the same as we got last year, and I noticed there's a lot of big chunks of bark in there. What I do when I take it and screen it, to get those big chunks of bark out.
I don't screen it, but when I put it in here, if I see big chunks of bark,
These
I
are
throw them out.
really big chunks
Okay.
compared to Jolly Roger. And I use that to start seeds, and I think it'd probably be helpful for you to have
Okay.
screen soil there, because there's
I'm
some
glad to
pretty
know
big
I
chunks
have-
in there.
I
Big
have,
enough to start orchids,
I have a lot of sand at my house that I use for fine things.
Yeah,
And I find that a little quarter mesh, that's a size of screen you can
Yeah.
buy in metal. And I'll
Yeah.
take a little quarter mesh screen, put my sand in that, shake it, even though it looks, you think a quarter inch is really big. It's amazing how big a rock does not go through, and I get really fine sand.
Yeah.
So since you've told me that, I'll use that same quarter mesh screen to sift this through.
Use it for potting soil, it really,
Yeah, that should
really
work
makes
well.
it for starting things. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Once you notice that the leaf buds are starting to come out, is that when you can take the top off?
Give it a few more weeks.
Okay.
Because you want to, and then start looking for roots
Okay.
down here. Okay, you want to be well rooted before you do anything else with it. And when you move it to another pot, try not to disturb these roots any more than you have to. I have found, this is getting a little afield, I have found that I've had some roots that were not very cooperative. And in order to move those plants to the larger pot, I've literally flooded the larger pot so that all the soil in that pot is now swimming in water. I put way too much water in there than you need. Okay, just think about mixing something up in a bowl with way too much milk or water and it all floats. You can take a plant that's just a bare rooted plant and put it down through that water mixture without damaging anything, because the water makes it. Then lift the pot up, let the water drain out, now it grips the roots. Are you with me? And then I have found that worked really well in trying to root bare rooted plants. And when anything I did along these lines would just cause the roots to break. You don't break any roots that way.
Can you speak to trying to start a a woodier stem that's bigger around?
Okay, I've got one right here. Where is my woody one that doesn't? Everybody knows what this is? This came from our last Master Gardener meeting. This was part of one of the centerpieces. So I don't know who brought this, but thank you very much. When you're rooting plants, one of the no-nos is to have flowers on it, because the flowers take so much energy. With no roots, you can't get it. I'm gonna see if I can make this root with the flowers on it.
It's hard, I know, it smells so good.
You have to cut them off and put them in water to it open.
So that was just a stem cutting, that's really just
Just
an arrangement, not a root off of the base of a mother plant.
Okay, so I've got to cut this plant.
Some
I'm gonna put
arrangements
this way
are sprayed
down,
with
okay.
stuff, so I wondered about that.
Just like before, when I'm taking the cutting from the main plant, I'm going to cut this just above a node.
It's yellow.
Oh, I'm going to use these. I'm going to, these are certainly easy to see where the nodes are on here. I'm going to get 2 nodes under the soil.
You'll have to let us know.
Yeah, well, I can let you know how this came out, because I have no idea. I have never actually done. I have so many little rootings from the mother plant that I don't have to actually try to root this. So I'll let you know. Anybody asks me, I'll tell you that this live or die.
How long do you think it would take for you to show signs of its survival?
I find that a couple of weeks at least that you're out here. The first day you're out here every few hours, second day maybe a couple times a day, by the third day you're spraying it one time. Just look to see how much moisture is still left on the leaves. You want to every now and then, lift the, if you're using this greenhouse back here, you want to lift the greenhouse up or take the lid off. Early in the morning is a good time to do that because it doesn't have the heat of the day to deal with. A lot of this work you can tell I do in the summertime.
So if you're starting some cuttings now, Steve, what is the temperature? Like, my garage stays somewhere in the 40s. Is that too cold?
I think I would not want it to be that cold.
You put it on a pad? You put it on a heating pad?
Heating pads would work great. I do not have a heating pad, but
Yeah.
I think that would be a great idea.
Grow mat. Okay, or else keep it in the house.
Yes, I think the house is the best place right now. I happen to have a sunroom that we built about 10 years ago, and so I'm lucky. My wife tells me it's not a greenhouse, but in the wintertime. Okay, we'll see if this thing with flowers on it actually makes it. The odds are against it. But you saw how easy that was to do.
So because you like the flowers, you're going to leave them on, but would you improve its chances by taking the flowers
You improve
off?
the chances a ton by cutting the flowers off. Everything in my body says, whack these off.
Why
Not
don't you
gonna do it.
take 2 off and leave 1?
Yeah. We want it to live.
And then press the flowers.
Doing
No, I'm gonna leave them all.
They just can't do it
I've
again.
got plenty of Akuba plenty of these
You
bushes
can
to
always
mess with.
press the
I
flower.
think it's about time for a break. Came back a few days later after some rain and all, and the soil had settled, and put more soil right to the top. I ran into problems with squirrels looking for that nut that they didn't put there, but they're going to try to find it.
Yeah.
So the first thing I did was I tried stuff like this over top of my plant. Remember, we're talking about big pots. So I would put this over top of the branch. That worked some. I took gumballs that I have in my yard and put gumballs all over the top. That worked. The thing that worked best is the one item I thought I had, but I don't see it in my group, was I took a plastic bag, like you would get apples in, a bag of apples at the store. And I made a cover over top of the pot, put a rubber band around the bottom, put a hole right in the middle so water could come into the pot when it rained. That was the best thing, because the squirrels didn't tear those up for some reason. and they stayed in there. So I've been using that technique ever since, and for some reason the apple bag is still safely at home. But that's all it was. I just covered the top with a piece of heavy plastic and put a rubber band around it. This technique is called, I call the technique, first I called it horizontal layering until I went to a garden club, and about halfway through my spiel, a little hand goes up and I asked the young lady, she says, "What is layering?" Because layering is not instinctive. When you talk about, you guys all had layering in your class. Layering is that technique where they wrapped they wounded the branch of a tree and at a node, and then they wrapped some moss around the branch and then covered it with plastic and left it there for a long time. You come back after a while and you'll see roots growing out into that moss that you put around it. It works, and they call that layering. Well, that doesn't compute. It's not a layer. It doesn't seem like layering anyway. So horizontal layering didn't work well, so we call it horizontal propagation. This is after this was extremely successful with the Cuba, I then tried using this on a plant that I have had since my house was built 40 years ago, and my azaleas started dying. The ones that were put in by the builder as part of the builder package, they put in a bunch of dwarf azaleas. And I'm pretty good at getting stuff to propagate and grow from stem cuttings. I am lousy at getting my dwarf azaleas to root from stem cuttings. I wanted to see, was it my technique? What was I doing wrong? So I did 50 hydrangea cuttings and 50 azalea cuttings. 48 of the 50 hydrangea cuttings made it, and I had hydrangeas all over the place. 2 of the other cuttings, I said, I don't think it's my technique. I need to do it differently. And by then I'd been doing the a Cuba in a pot for a while. So I brought the same technique. Now these are dwarf azaleas, they're really small. I brought it around to the front of the house where I had these dwarves. And this probably isn't much different than the size of my full-grown dwarf azaleas. This is Helen's. And I tried the technique, and it works so well. Those people that have that know their azaleas know that from a node you'll get 5 branches. 1 will stick down like my thumb, and 4 will stick up. So if you go look at your azaleas today, you'll see that it's typical of azaleas. I cut off the bottom branch, took the node, put it down into the pot with the 4 branches sticking out. Now this was my first try with an azalea. Had it covered, this was in a 2-quart pot or something. Came back after, I would look around in it every now and then. I would poke around to see if I had any roots or not. And it seemed to be growing. I left it there for a couple of months. Then when I thought I had enough roots, I cut it free of the mother plant. Until that time, the mother plant is providing all the food and nourishment right through the little umbilical cord called a branch. And the plant lived. Then after another couple of months, I was in no rush to do this. I took the plant and moved it to my potting bench, pulled the whole thing out of the pot, and looked to see what I had. And in that part where the palm represents the node, and these represent the 4 branches, I had roots galore coming out of that node. Wow. I was able to take my shears and cut in between the node, in between each branch and the node, so I got roots. I got 4 brand new plants out of that azalea. So I had a 400% success first time out. And then those were growing in my pots. And then I asked myself, why can't I do this in a pot? Instead of going around to the front yard and, having to get down on the ground. I'm getting older to where it's easier to get down than up. And I tried this in pots, and it works magnificently in pots. It is so easy, though, that if you can get down to your plants that you're wanting to propagate this easy way, if you can get down to the plant so you can get to the branch that you want to propagate, then do that. But if not, look around at the plants, at the perennials that you have growing in pots, and say, how many of these can I do this? I want to try this. I want to see if I can get good at it, for instance. So what I do is I cut the pot so that it fits the branch. I brought this pot up here and put it down It's fitting under the branch. I'm not sure how well you can see this because I don't want to dump all the soil out. But the pot, the lower part of the notch is right up against the next node down. I've got this node right here that's going to be down under the pot, down under the soil. So I'm going to wound the plant right here. This is one of the trickiest things, is trying to get down on your, I usually would take a piece of plastic so I can get down, and sometimes I'll actually lay down under the plant. I have spinal stenosis, so the pain sometimes gets pretty bad. And I'll wound the plant, figure out which node was it that I wanted to do it with.
So, above and below the node, or you?
I'll do above and below the node.
Okay.
Everything that I think is going to be under the soil, I'll go ahead and wound.
Okay.
The next thing was to find a rooting hormone that would stay on the plant. I first used a paintbrush with Rutone. And I'd use an awful lot of Rutone just trying to get a little bit on the plant. And then I discovered what I was looking for online one day. This is not the original bottle, but there's something called Clonex. And it's more like a Vicks Vaseline. So you could, but as it sits for a while, it does turn to more of a liquid. This I kept in my fridge. Again, I don't take the original container and ever dip into my original container. So this is Clonex. It's purple. So you can easily, I don't have a paintbrush today, I found out. So I'll use this tissue and hope that I don't soak up all this. But this is a rooting hormone just like the other rooting hormones we looked at earlier today, except it's purple. And I want to paint this on, covering all the places that I just scraped the bark from, and then a little above and below it. This is fantastic stuff, by the way. It's amazing. You could use it for
Is it a
everything.
K or a C?
Clonex.
Oh, C.
They have different kinds. Do you know of Clonex?
I
You can
only
buy that even supply in Cincinnati.
Oh, I haven't seen it at a store. I just haven't got it. I have to take one of these to get her root on.
Takes a little bit.
Did she not take my card?
I wonder if
She took
it's the
mine.
same,
Oh,
if
I
I
don't
can
know.
just not dilute it.
Well, if I'm supposed to dilute
They got all
mine, I
different
didn't know it.
brands.
This is full strength out of the
Full
bottle.
strength, yeah. I'm gonna try that.
Now I'll take my plant. I'll take my pot with the cut, and I'll put the cut. Again, I will find a pot that works for me. It could be this thing, it could be a bigger pot. I'll find one that works. It really depends on the space you have to do this and the location of your node. And you don't want this stuff to spill out. So that little piece that you cut off, don't throw it away. That's going to be that's how you're going to keep all the soil from washing out where you made the cut in the pot. So this is going to be your window blind. You might want to have sacrificed another pot just to get a piece to fill that space. I'm going to put that into the space. I wetted this back in the kitchen a while ago, so let's see if it's still wet.
And you're using potting soil and
Is it
fertilizer?
is it the same
This
mix?
is the same potting soil that I use for
Okay.
everything. And I always use a fresh potting soil. I reuse all my potting soil to replant plants. I don't think there's any such thing as old potting soil. But when I'm doing new plants, I use fresh potting soil. I have no idea if anybody ever sterilized this soil or not, but I'm using this fresh potting soil.
Of course. No, because we want the natural microbes in it. You
I
don't
didn't hear you. What
sterilize
you-
it. Don't sterilize it, you'll lose all your bacteria. You need those
Ah,
microbes.
so you probably know all about not buying ultra pasteurized milk, right? Because if you're buying ultra pasteurized milk, you might as well buy chalk water, because every single enzyme has been killed.
A tip on the perlite, when you buy it in the small bag that Steve showed from like Lowe's, it's very expensive. But at TR Feed and Seed and sells it in the 50-pound bags for like $22. So if you're going to be doing a lot,
That 16-quart bag probably cost me $10.
exactly. And so I tend to buy it in big quantities and then like potting, sometimes we'll just get like a bucket bullet or something you share, or just use it.
Now remember, this branch is attached to the mother plant. It's going to be growing just like normal, except I have this place that I wounded and put some rooting hormone on that I am hoping is going to make roots. Once it makes roots, since this is Helen's plant, I'll leave it here. Once it makes roots, Helen can come and cut this plant free from the mother plant, take this pot someplace else where she's able to keep an eye on the pot and keep the soil moist. And usually I wait until I see roots coming out of the bottom of the pot.
You have to spray
And then I'll take the plant. Actually, you don't have to do anything to this you wouldn't do to the mother plant because it's still a branch of a plant. It has not been cut free of the plant.
Okay.
But you have to water, right?
Yeah, plant.
So lots of
water
water.
it, correct?
You do have to water it, right?
Yeah, you do have to water. You have to keep this soil wet. Don't let this dry out on you.
Right.
Okay.
You
If
said
it
you didn't have
dries
to
out
do
the
anything
roots
to
that
it.
have been formed, not only will the roots dry out and therefore no more roots, but the plant will heal over and it's sort of like having a stem that is healed over. You won't be able to do anything with it. You can try starting over again on the same spot or picking a new spot.
And then where are you cutting?
Where's-
Again, when you get the roots,
Uh-huh.
where do you cut?
You cut the mother plant, wherever this branch is coming out of the mother plant.
And so what happens to this part here?
It's growing. It will have, when you cut this free of the mother plant,
Right.
this will be a whole new plant with its own roots.
Oh, okay, got it.
And this works well with azaleas, you said.
Say that again?
This works well with azaleas, you said?
Well, it works with my azaleas. I've taken other azaleas that were the larger
ones?
bushes and stuff.
Yeah.
I can root those, in the blink of an eye. It's just my dwarf azaleas that I can't
Yeah.
seem to root that way. So this is the only way I've been able to get my new dwarf azaleas.
And so you root your big azaleas the same way?
I don't have to. They do a good job of rooting
They do
themselves.
themselves, huh? Okay.
So it's just the ones that
Steve,
don't.
could you do this with camellias?
I see no reason why you could not.
Oh, okay. Because you said you could do it with tea olives, and they're related, right?
Right.
Tea olives, yeah, so. Oh, that's
Gardenias?
good.
I have actually done this with camellias.
Oh, great.
I have a white camellia, which I had never heard of,
Mm.
and it had white blossoms last year. I looked out just the other day, and darn if it's not looking like it's dying. It's still in the pot. So if you have a plant that is dying on you, and you have some
Let's save it.
good green stems elsewhere on the plant, take cuttings from that. The rest of the plant might die, but take cuttings from that. That could be a brand new, fresh plant that you get to grow.
That's a
If
great.
just don't take it from a diseased area.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I'll have my akuba that will suddenly have stems that are turning black, and then I'll be one nice green stem. I'll cut that stem off.
Have you tried it with other houseplants? Like I have.
Well,
I have a-
houseplants are so easy to root. I just stick them in water and put it in the window, and I make roots that way.
Okay.
So I really,
Which you could do with the Cuba too. It roots in
Yeah.
water really easily.
It roots real easy in water.
Oh, wow.
I have had mixed success with the Cuba. I have some that tends to want to root as soon as it hits the water. I have other that'll sit in the water and turn dark, not do anything. So I use this technique. I have so many Akuba that I don't have to use any technique anymore.
And they'll come up from their seeds too. I'm getting pretty many coming up from seeds.
That's neat. I've never actually seen one come from seeds. So anyway, this is the technique I wanted to show you. We call this horizontal propagation. It is that simple. Any questions on that?
Is there a better time of year to do this?
Do this anytime. Anytime.
And then
I've
how-
been out in deep winter, and suddenly here's this branch staring at me, and I think, oh my goodness, I need to go ahead and propagate that. I didn't see that branch before.
If anybody wants to stay and do that all over my yard, good one.
See, you have that one in a pot, but what if you have one just growing in your yard?
If you have them, well, the whole idea was, this started off with the ones growing in my yard. And I would take I would usually use a larger pot if I could, since I have more area there. This is a small pot to do the rooting in because that's what fits inside this container.
Okay, so you.
But in the yard, I'll use a much larger pot.
Okay.
If the pot doesn't reach the branch, I'll have another pot I'll turn upside down under that pot.
Oh, so just keep building it up until
You
it
want
gets
to
to that,
bring the
okay.
pot to the branch, not.
Not the
don't
branch
you-
of the pot, no.
You don't want to bend the
perlites.
branch down. As soon as it rains, this branch is going to pop out of that red soil.
Ah,
So you want the branch, you want the pot to be nice and tight up against the branch.
okay, great. Thank you.
And that's how simple that is. And without further questions, I'm done.
That's similar.